Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on which time you're watching this video. My name is Professor Ruben Ramos, and this is gonna be our final asynchronous class on superhero comic books in nowadays society. So let's start with Scott McCloud's chapter 8, A Word About Color. In chapter 5, we dealt with the expressionistic potential of lines as anticipated by artists at the turn of the century. But of course, it was color which most captivated artists of that era. Throughout art history, color has been a powerful, even predominant, concern of fine artists everywhere. Some, like Georges Seurat, devoted their lives to its study. Others, like Kandinsky, believed that colors could have profound physical and emotional effects on people. These yellow walls make me uncomfortable, Mary. Color can be a formidable ally for artists in any visual medium. Yet, in comics, the career of color has been, well, a bit spotty. There are many reasons for the stormy relationship between comics and color, but most can be summed up in two words: commerce and technology. Now, all aspects of comics history have been affected by commerce. Money has a tremendous effect on what is and isn't seen. But color in comics has always been unusually sensitive to the shifting tides of technology. The technology of color reproduction was first anticipated in 1861 when Scottish physicist Sir James Clerk Maxwell isolated what we now call the three additive primaries: red, green, and blue. These colors, roughly red, blue, and green, projected together on a screen in various combinations, could reproduce every color in the visible spectrum. They were called additive because they literally added up to pure white light. 8 years later, French pianist Louis Ducos du Horon, whom I don't have a picture of, devised the idea of three subtractive primaries. These colors, cyan, magenta, and yellow, can also mix to produce any hue in the visible spectrum, but rather than adding light, these three do it by filtering it out. This subtractive effect was achieved through transparent substances such as cellophane, colored glass, watercolors, or printer's ink. And this is one of the major reasons when we purchase a colored printer cartridge that we see the three primary colors as cyan, magenta, and yellow. Color comics hit the newspaper industry like an atomic bomb. Color boosted sales, but it also boosted costs. Measures were taken to streamline the process and make it more cost effective. And the standard four color process took over. This process restricted the intensity of the three primaries to 100%, 50%, and 20% using black ink for the line work. The look of these colors, held by bold, simple outlines and reproduced on cheap newsprint, eventually became the look of comics in America. So, while the expressive art of line was subjected to the subtractive filter of commerce on its way to comics, color was subjected to the filters of both commerce and technology. To counteract the dueling effect of newsprint and to stand out from the competition, costume heroes were clad in bright primary colors and fought in a bright primary world. The colors were picked for strength and contrasted strongly with one another, but on most pages no one color dominated. With the emotional impact of single color saturation, the expressive potential of American color comics was often canceled out to an emotional gray. As always, there were some exceptions, but this was the overall trend. However, while comics colors were less than expressionistic, they were fixed with a new iconic power, because costume colors remain exactly the same, panel after panel. They came to symbolize characters in the mind of the reader. So, blue, a little yellow, and gray would represent Batman. Green, light red, and green would represent Hulk, and so on. Many see the superhero as a form of modern mythology. If so, this aspect of color may play a part. Symbols are the stuff of which gods are made. Another property of flat colors is their tendency to emphasize the shape of objects, both animate and inanimate. As any child who has ever colored by numbers knows instinctively, these colors objectify their subjects. We become more aware of the physical form or of objects than in black and white. A game in motion becomes a ball in air. A face showing emotion becomes a head and two hands. The world takes on the childhood reality of the playground and recalls a time when shape preceded meaning. Oblong swinging sets, cylindrical jungle gyms, the wonder of things. Doesn't it follow then that the masters of flat color comics are, above all, masters of form and composition? We have Kirby, here as example, then McKay, then Cole. From Steve Ditko to Karl Barks to P. Craig Russell, the love of shapes persists in worlds fairly glowing with the mystery of first encounters. Any wonder then that comics in America has been so reluctant to grow up? In Europe, Hergé from Tintin captured the magic of such flat colors with unprecedented subtlety. Hergé created a kind of democracy of form in which no shape was any less important than any other, a completely objective world. Comics printing was superior in Europe, and for Hergé, flat colors were a preference, not a necessity. But others, such as Clevelot, Casa, and Mobius, saw in their superior printing an opportunity to express themselves through a more intense subjective palette. Palette. Some of these work began reaching America in the 70s, inspiring many young artists to look beyond their four-color walls. Suddenly, it seemed possible for color to take on a central role. Colors could express a dominant mood. Tones and modeling could add depth. Whole scenes could be virtually about color. Color as sensation, color as environment, color as color. Since the late 70s, more and more upscale color projects have begun appearing in America. Some publishers at the beginning tried applying the traditional four-color process to better paper with garish results. Take that! And when modeling and more subtle hues were applied, though, they seemed out of place on the old shape sensitivity line drawings. Take that! The surface was changing, but not the core. For all their subtle hues, comics were still being written in primary colors. The new form required the creation of new idioms. Unfortunately, color is still an expensive option and has historically been in the hands of larger, more conservative publishers. This is beginning to change as I write this, but it's still the exception, not the rule. Comic artists wanting to conduct bold new experiments in comics art still have to learn, in most cases, to be bold in black and white. The differences between black and white and color comics are vast and profound, affecting every level of reading experience. In black and white, the ideas behind the art are communicated more directly. Meaning transcends form. Art approaches language. In flat colors, forms themselves take on more significance. The world becomes a playground of shapes and space. And through more expressive colors, comics can become an intoxicating environment of sensations that only color can give. The surface qualities of color will continue to attract readers more easily than black and white, and the story of color will no doubt continue to be intervened with the forces of commerce and technology. We live in a world of colors, not just black and white. Color comics will always seem more real at first glance. But comics readers look for many things besides reality, and technology notwithstanding, color will never replace black and white entirely. One thing's for sure, though. When used well, color in comics can, like comics itself, amount to far more than the sum of its parts. And this is the end of chapter 8. I will continue now to chapter 9 since this is our last asynchronous class and the chapter is a very small one. Chapter 9, putting it all together. So, why is this medium we call comics so important? Why should we try so hard to understand comics? From the original idea, Will Eisner's idea of sequential art, to MacLeod's idea that we're gonna re-see in a few minutes. I think the answer lies deep within the human condition. We all live in a state of profound isolation. And with the cell phones and modern IT technology, this state of profound isolation has been increased exponentially from the time MacLeod has written this book till the modern day. No other human being can ever know what's like to be you from the inside. And no amount of reaching out to others can ever make them feel exactly what you feel. All media of communications are a byproduct of our sad inability to communicate directly from mind to mind. Sad, of course, because nearly all problems in human history stem from that inability. Each medium, the term comes from the Latin word meaning middle, serves as a bridge between minds. Spoken word, in this case. Media convert thoughts into forms that can traverse the physical world and be reconverted by one or more senses back into thoughts. Written word, music, cinema, and others. In comics, the conversion follows a path from mind to hand to paper to eye to mind. Ideally, the artist's message will run this gauntlet without being affected by it, but in practice, this is rarely the case. The comics I see in my mind will never be seen in their entirety by anyone else, no matter how hard I try. Ask any writer or filmmaker or painter just how much of a given project truly represents what he or she envisioned it to be. You'll hear 20%, 10, 5. Few will claim more than 30. The mastery of one's medium is the degree to which that percentage can be increased, the degree to which the artist's ideas survive the journey, or for some artists, the degree to which the inevitable detours are made useful by the artist. As I said in chapter 7, I believe we all have something to say to the world. I am a firm believer in the inherent worth of all inner truths. There's only one power that can break through the wall which separates all artists from their audience, the power of understanding. Understanding comics is serious business. Today, comics is one of the very few forms of mass communication in which individual voices still have a chance to be heard. Those of us who tackle the business of comics have many obstacles to overcome, but they pale in comparison to what a filmmaker or playwright has to contend with. Comics welcomes any writer or artist to step into its world, a world as close as pen or pencil and paper. The wall of ignorance that prevents so many human beings from seeing each other clearly can only be breached by communication. And communication is only effective when we understand the forms that communication can take. I've been trying to understand comics for about 15 years. Here's what I've come up with so far. The first step in any such effort is to clear our minds of all preconceived notions about comics. Only by starting from scratch can we discover the full range of possibilities comics offer. This means learning to separate the form of comics from its often inconsistent contents. The best definition for comics will, I think, be the most expensive, starting from sequential art. With a little refining, such a definition can take comics far into the future, juxtapose pictorial and other images in deliberate sequence, and far into the past, beyond the artificial starting point of 1896 and the Yellow Kid. Honk, honk. Over 3,000 years beyond. There's an incredible wealth of ancient comics, and some may yet hold the key to comics' future. Discovering and cataloging this work has already begun, but there's much more that needs to be done. There's a big, gaping hole in the official history of art, and it's high time somebody filled it. Through the works and writings of these neglected masters, we see the first glimpses of comics' limitless potential as an art form. The picture story, which critics disregard and scholars scarcely notice, has had great influence at all times, perhaps even more than written literature. Rudolf Topfer, in the middle of 19th century, 1845, and the attitudes that were to obscure that potential for many years to come. In addition, the picture story appeals mainly to children and the lower classes. Again, Rudolf Topfer, the same year. Attitudes which have allowed some modern comics' most promising artists to be segregated from their much malignant cousins, elevated beyond their heritage by a change of name. Comics is a site-based medium. The whole world of visual iconography is at the disposal of comics creators, including the full range of pictorial styles from realistic representational art to the simplest cartoons, to the totally abstract and the invisible world of symbols and language. Throughout its history, comics has harnessed the power of cartoons to command viewer involvement and identification, and realism to capture the beauty and complexity of the visible world. The dance of the visible and the invisible is at the very heart of comics through the power of closure. Creators and reader are partners in the invisible, creating something out of nothing, time and time again. Comics is a great balancing act, an art as subtractive as it is additive, and a baffling two-step of time and space. But nowhere is the balance between the visible and the invisible more conspicuous than in pictures and words. A split foretold in the birth of art itself, begun in earnest over 5,000 years ago, and grown wider and wider for centuries until eventually all connection was lost. And then rediscovered in the great madness that was the 20th century. Today's comics do their dance with the invisible better than ever before. But the language of comics continues to evolve. As all language must evolve. Because embedded in all pictures of the visible world are the seeds of the invisible, the seeds of expressionism and synesthetics. But evolution is a tricky thing. Species evolve differently in different climates. When we compare North America and Europe, we leave behind others such as Japan. So it was in Japan where comics developed in relative isolation, spawning a host of unique approaches to making comics. As comics grows into the next century, creators will aspire to many higher goals than appealing to the lowest common denominator. Ignorance and short-sighted business practices will no doubt obscure the possibilities of comics from time to time, as they always have. But the truth about comics can't stay hidden from view forever, and sooner or later, the truth will shine through. Today, the possibilities for comics are, as they always have been, endless. Comics offers tremendous resources to all writers and artists. Faithfulness, control, a chance to be heard far and wide without fear of compromise. It offers range and versatility with all the potential imagery of film and painting, plus the intimacy of the written word. And all that's needed is the desire to be heard, like the 6 steps, the will to learn, and the ability to see. And now, as you can see, our world, mine and yours, on what portrays a comic book, or what are really comic books, is way much more developed than just a world of characters, iconic as they may be. It's a world of concepts, of theories, of information which gather a lot of knowledge and can be reached by any one of us because we have deliberately chosen to be a part of it. This is the world of comics as I understand it so far, and I, Professor Rubin, believe it is now your world of comics as well. I've learned a lot about comics since beginning this project, and I know I have a lot left to learn. I hope you'll all consider exploring or continuing to explore comics on your own. However, you experience comics as reader, creator, or business person. There are 1,000,001 ways you can help comics to grow into the next century. Think about it, and thanks for listening. Oh, wow. Did I take that long? I'm sorry. I better let you go. Back to the old drawing board. At least you are not married to him. I get this all the time. And here's the end of Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics book. Hope you have enjoyed it, reading it, as much as I always do. And we will continue with your critical reviews and with Watchmen on our final synchronous class this week. Thank you so much for listening. Have a ball, guys. Bye bye.